Directors meeting for April 17th, 2018. I'd like to welcome everybody that's in City Hall with us tonight as we go about doing the city's business. At this point in time, it's time to see who's here. So, Madam Clerk, if you would please read the roll.
Director Hendricks. Director Richardson.
Here.
Director Bennett.
Here.
Director Hines.
Present.
Director Wright. Director Wyatt. Director Contreras. Director Fortson.
Here.
Director Adcock.
Present.
Vice Mayor Webb.
Here.
Mayor Stoller.
Here. At this time, let me call on City Director Irma Hendricks for our invocation, please. Go
It's
ahead.
a pleasant surprise because normally it's scheduled on the bulletin, but I have something for you.
All right.
You got this? Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight. And I would also like to add, once the board of directors set something in motion, the citizens of this city, no one can stop it. Thank you.
If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a presentation before we get into the agenda, and I'd like to call on City Director Doris Wright to make a presentation to the Parkview Arts and Science Magnet High School basketball champions.
Good evening, everyone. It is a distinct pleasure to present this award because you know I love my schools. Anyway, Parkview Arts and Science Magnet High School 5A boys basketball team. On March 9th, 2018, at Bank of the Ozarks Arena in Hot Springs, Arkansas, the Parkview Patriots won the boys 5A basketball championship. Amen. Parkview defeated Mills by the score of 54-51. In the final 2 minutes of the game, Parkview outscored Mills 7 points to 1. To get to the final, they defeated Nettleton, Harrison, and Hot Springs. Overall, their season record was 25 wins and 8 losses. This is Parkview's 14th boys basketball state championship. They first won in 1971 and were most recently here at City Hall in 2016. Since 1971, no other team has won more state championships in basketball. Can we get a hand on that? Senior guard C.J. White was named the 5A classification MVP. All right. Ethan Henderson and Alan Flanagan joined White on the 5A All-Tournament team. Okay? Mr. White and Mr. Henderson were also named 2018 All-State Basketball for the 5A division. Right? The team is coached by Al Flanagan, a Little Rock legend. All right? It was the 7th state championship in 11 trips to the title game. The championship was also his 524th win as a coach. We got to get a hand on that. Randy Rutherford is the principal of Parkview. He's unable to be here tonight due to another school district event. But in his absence, we have assistant principals John Kelly and Eric Henderson with us this evening. John Daniels is the athletic director for the Little Rock School District. Marvin Burton is the deputy superintendent, associate superintendent for high schools, and Mike Poore is the superintendent. Can you all gentlemen please join me here at the podium? It's my distinct pleasure and pride to present to you this plaque in honor of your achievement. It says, Mark Stola, the City Board of Directors, and City Manager Bruce T. Moore congratulate the Parkview Arts and Science Magnet High School Patriots 2018 Boys Basketball 5A State Champions. In the quest for the championship, the players and coaches exemplified outstanding sportsmanship, participation, leadership, responsibility, and teamwork. And we were planning to present this on April the 3rd, so that is the date on the plaque. But I am so proud of you guys. Thank you so much for this hard work. It's exciting. 524 winners. That's let
Coach.
me get a picture.
Coach.
We're going to do that. Coach, we want to get a picture for I don't know what he do with them. I know he take a lot of them. Okay. And I want you to say a few words, but I want the team.
So, Director Wright, let's get the boys up
Yes.
here.
Come on, team.
I'd like to ask them to come up here and
Introduce themselves.
introduce yourself and tell us what grade you're in. And for those seniors that there might be in there, if you know what you're going to be doing next year, give us an idea of what you're up to.
And I'd like to get a picture of them with their coach.
Just come on up. Speaking to the microphone, tell us your name and what grade you're in.
My name is Amari Farr. I'm a senior guard, class of 2018, and next year I plan on doing something with computer science or engineering. I'm undecided on what school I'm going to go to. Grade point average is a 3.8, and my ACT score is a 28.
All right.
I'm Ethan Henderson. I'm a center at Parkview. I'm a senior. Now I'm planning on going to Fayetteville, Arkansas for basketball.
All right.
My name is Rod Terry, and I was a guard at Parkview, and I'm undecided right now.
My name is CJ White, and I'm a guard at Parkview, 12th grade. I plan on continuing my basketball career, but I don't know what school I'm going to yet.
My name is Alan Flanagan. I'm a guard, and I'm a junior at Parkview. Arian Simmons, combo forward, junior.
My name is Keelan Young. I'm a sophomore. I plan on being here next year.
Good boy.
My name is Ryan Gordon. I'm in 10th grade.
My name is Jared Presley. I'm also in 10th grade. I plan on being Parkview next year.
My name is Victor Umera, and I'm a sophomore guard.
My name is Keelan Harris, and I'm 9th grade, and I'm a guard.
My name is Christopher Slay, and I'm a freshman, and I play forward.
My name is Colin Evans, and I'm a freshman, and I play guard.
My name is Corin Latrell. I'm in the 9th grade, and Coach Flanagan taught me well.
All right.
Can we hear from you, Coach? Yeah. Would you like to have something to say? Can we have a coach come?
You want to go ahead and take it, or you want me to go ahead? Well, on behalf of Parkview, I would just like to thank Director Moore, Wright, Mayor, and the board for the invitation. Hey, coming down here never gets old. You know, we've been in this thing a while. Hey, people don't know this was probably the most gratifying year I had. Lost 10 players off of this team. 10 players. We was in the final last year, got beat by Mills. We got right back there with 10 players missing. And I want to thank these guys, especially these seniors, for hanging in there and believing in me and coming back. And we got the job done. Mills beat us 3 times. 3 times this year. And we beat us 4 in a row, but they beat us 3 times this year. You know, but we got the one that counted. We got the one that counted. I just want to say this about these championships. Everybody talk about these championships. We've been in existence since when, Coach? 70 and 71? 71. Hey, we don't recognize it. We wasn't here. We don't recognize these 1929s and 1940s. It's from when we was here throughout. Everybody got that? And and I appreciate you, Mr. Rector. Keep on doing the good work.
Well, and I think I can't see over these tall guys here. Do we have some, parents here that want to stand? Some parents? All right.
By the way now.
I want everybody to know that my assistant, Starla Frazier's got a son in here that's on the basketball team.
I can't forget
I heard
my
good things
my
about
assistant
this
coach.
team. I expect you guys to repeat next year.
I like to recognize my assistant coaches too. Without them, we wouldn't have got it done. Hey, what y'all saying? Nick Anderson, Tom Poole, Nathan Clayton.
Congratulations, guys.
Appreciate
Coach.
everybody.
Okay, we can now move on to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read items 1 through 13, please.
A motion to approve the minutes of the January 16th, 2018, February 6th, 2018, and February 20th, 2018 Little Rock City Board of Director meetings. A resolution to authorize the city manager to execute a contract with K-Force Government Solutions for a total amount of $85,990 for the purchase of one Trauma FX whole body trauma simulator to be utilized by the Little Rock Fire Department, the Little Rock Police Department, and the Metropolitan Emergency Medical Services, and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Cruise Uniforms and Equipment for the total amount of $98,440 for the purchase of 9 L3 night vision devices and mounts for the Little Rock Police Department and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Gene Summers Construction, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $75,432 for the construction of improvements to 18th Street from Washington Street to Peyton Street and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Gene Summers Construction, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $301,132.20 for Otter Creek at Stagecoach Road drainage improvements and for other purposes. A resolution to express the willingness of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to utilize federal aid recreational trail funds and to authorize the mayor and city manager to execute any and all necessary agreements and contracts for its administration and for other purposes. A resolution to express the willingness of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to utilize federal aid transportation alternative program funds and to authorize the mayor and city manager to execute any and all necessary agreements and contracts for its administration and for other purposes. A resolution to express the willingness of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to utilize federal aid transportation alternative program funds and to authorize the mayor and the city manager to execute any and all necessary agreements and contracts for its administration and for other purposes. A A resolution to express the willingness of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas to utilize federal aid transportation alternative program funds and to authorize the mayor and city manager to execute any and all necessary agreements and contracts for its administration and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Mark McClarty Ford Lincoln for a total purchase price of $84,361.20 for the purchase of one 3 cubic yard dump truck for the Public Works Department and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with American Structure, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $1,316,240.40 for the construction of the Colobus Serval exhibit at the Little Rock Zoo and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize entry into a contractual agreement with the Arkansas State Fair Association for the use and expenditure of capital improvement sales and compensating use tax proceeds and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a lease for property owned by the Institute of Basic Life Principles, Inc. in the amount of $148,400 to provide downtown office space for the Little Rock Police Department for a period of 1 year and for other purposes.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
I have a question.
Opposed, say nay.
I have a question.
All right, go ahead, Director Hendricks.
Strictly for Mr. Moore. I've read the resolution that talk about the 75,000. That's number 4. Number 5, it's 301,000 for that contractor. Can you show me, Mr. Moore, and you have a graph up there to show what are they doing for this amount of money?
Which item?
4 and 5.
Sure. Let me,
Difference in the amount. One is 75,000, one is 301,000. That's a lot of money.
sure, let me ask our Public Works Director, Mr. Honeywell, to come forward.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, board members, Director Hendricks, are you asking for what are the scope of those two projects, or?
Because I'm concerned about the vast amount of money, a difference between those two projects.
Well, that has to do with the actual work that's involved in the two different projects. On item number 4, which is 18th Street.
I know where that is.
Okay, we're doing work between Washington and Peyton, so it's a very small project. That's why the cost is very low. The other one on Stagecoach, that's probably, I can't remember exactly how long it is, but it's a much bigger drainage project that's being undertaken.
You have nothing you can show me up there?
No, ma'am, we don't typically include that.
We're talking about a half a mile, what are we talking about?
No, ma'am, it's probably 600-700 feet.
Okay.
Crossing through multiple intersections, multiple driveways. We're also having to restore sidewalks with that project, and we're also installing concrete pipe for that distance, which is extremely expensive.
Okay, could you send that to me?
And
certainly.
Let me also, if I can interject, if the board, to remind the board that the goal at the end of the 3 phases, the 10 years, each ward is going to be fairly close equally. So yeah, you're going to have some projects depending on the scope and the nature. This is a drainage project; they're going to cost a little more. But when you have your ward meeting, we talk about that. But at the end of the process, and it won't be to the penny, but it's going to be very close. And that was the board's direction, and that's what we followed.
You press your button, please. Go ahead, Director Hendricks.
Okay, and the other cost that I looked at, number 7, and I did this thing at home instead of doing the one here. Bruce, could you tell me the amount that's going to be involved with this? Or I think this is something that has to do with the city of Little Rock bed, transportation, these programs and these funds. I'm really concerned because 2 or 3 items said that you and the mayor would get together and then you all would do whatever is necessary. So that will not be brought back to us as a decision that the 2 of you all are making
No, ma'am. This just gives us the authority to execute the agreements. This is the same process. This is a regulation or mandate. In order for us to apply for these funds, the governing council, the governing body has to approve it, and this is saying it gives us the authorization to sign the documents.
And who will be giving you these funds?
If we're successful, these are federal funds through the Arkansas Highway, or Arkansas DOT.
Okay, but that's not included in this thing, is it?
It is.
Oh, I'm missing it? Okay, the last thing I think I want you to express. Okay, I'll let it go. Thank you.
Director Wright, you're recognized.
Mr. Moore, the discussion on the drainage issue brought up an issue that came up last night about a project that's ongoing in Ward 6 on Potter Street.
Your mic's not on.
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not speaking in it. The discussion on drainage issues brought up a project that we had previously approved on Potter Street. The residents had some questions, one lady in particular, and I thought you had come out and looked at that, and they were going to modify the contract to make sure that that drainage issue on the side where her house was included. It's on the corner of Potter and 38th. Can you please look at that? I didn't want to forget. I had promised her I was going to bring it up to you tonight because I thought we had got that resolved, but she said she talked to the contractor and he said that it's not included. Thank you.
Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. John, point of clarification on item number 4, Payton to Washington Street, that's 1 block at the most. Is that not correct? So it's much, much shorter distance than item number 5. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Director Hendricks, did you wish to change your vote? Right now it's recorded as voting for the consent agenda. What? Okay, very good. All right, we can move on now to our grouped items, which are ordinances 14 and 15. Madam Clerk, first reading, please.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirement of competitive bidding and enter into a sole source contract with Socrata Inc. in an amount not to exceed $90,871.20 plus applicable taxes and fees for the annual software subscription and maintenance renewal and for other purposes. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid to authorize the city manager to issue a purchase order to Axon Enterprises, Inc. in the amount of $72,062.73 for the purchase of 18 less than lethal electric control devices for the Little Rock Police Department and for other purposes. First reading.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and place these two ordinances on second reading. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Second reading, please.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirements of competitive bidding and enter into a sole source contract with Socrata Inc. in an amount not to exceed $90,871.20 plus applicable taxes and fees for the annual software subscription and maintenance renewal. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid to authorize the city manager to issue a purchase order to Axon Enterprises, Inc. in the amount of $72,062.73 for the purpose of 18 less than lethal electronic control devices for the Little Rock Police Department. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place in third and final reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and place these two ordinances on third and final reading. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The motion to suspend has been approved. Third and final reading, please.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirement of competitive bidding and enter into a sole source contract with Socrata Inc. in an amount not to exceed $90,871.20 plus applicable taxes and fees for the annual software subscription and maintenance renewal. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid to authorize the city manager to issue a purchase order to Axon Enterprises, Inc. in the amount of $72,062.73 for the purpose of 18 less than lethal electronic control devices for the Little Rock Police Department. Third reading.
Thank you. All in favor of the passage of these two ordinances indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The ordinances have passed. We can now move on to item 16, which is a discussion for the Board of Directors on the appeal question that has been before you in the past? Any discussion by board members? Okay, Director Adcock, you're recognized first.
Mayor,
please.
I'd like for Mr. Carpenter to give us our options, please.
Director Adcock, I think I'm correct that the judgment was filed on March the 26th. That means a notice of appeal has to be filed within 30 days, which will be April the 25th. If it's not filed within that time period, then there is no basis for appeal or no ability to appeal. The judge made a ruling, and I think I pointed this out to the board previously, that notwithstanding the state law definition that a person becomes a candidate for office when they take a substantial step towards seeking that office, which may include raising funds, neither Mr. Scott nor Mr. Sabin in this case were candidates. I think that ruling is erroneous, and I think that could trigger our ordinance. However, I don't think they're going to treat this as an election case, and I don't think it's going to be decided beforehand. Your options are to appeal and see if we can win on that argument. If we do, the case is sent back for a trial with the determination that these are candidates, and then whether or not the declaratory judgment action applies. I don't believe that that's going to happen before the election. And so, in all honesty, I think appealing this matter creates more problems than it solves. I know that there was concern about what to do about our ordinance in the interim. Do we repeal it? Do we pass another one? Do we declare that it's not applicable? Well, Judge Fox's order has declared it's not applicable because part of his rationale that neither Mr. Sabin nor Mr. Scott were candidates is that they could change their minds at the last minute and not file. You can't even file for a board position until sometime in August, and therefore, if you're not a candidate until August, an ordinance that keeps you from raising funds until June doesn't seem to make sense. More to the point, that definition applies now, at least in this area and in this city, to this election, and so I don't think that requires any change in the ordinance at this time. There are some issues that came up about expressly having applicability to the committees, the exploratory committees. I think we could do some changes to our ordinance that would make that clear, that would make also clear what constitutes a candidate and some other things of that nature, and then be prepared for the election in 2020.
Director Hendricks, you're next, please.
Mr. Carpenter, you start talking about the issue, but you didn't give a title. We have audiences that are listening, so can you tell just briefly what you're talking about?
The
We
city
don't, but the
brought a
audience
declaratory judgment action against the Arkansas Ethics Commission, asking essentially that the collection of monies for a political campaign for a city office that begins before June the 1st, the year of the election, is a violation, that the city is given authority by state law to set a more restrictive time for raising money than is permitted by state law, and that therefore the commission should does have the authority to step in and declare that a violation has occurred. The commission said that they have no authority over a local ordinance, and then the judge's ruling was that these two gentlemen aren't candidates. The commission has no ruling over a local ordinance. The ordinance doesn't say anything about exploratory committees, and dismissed the suit. Now, the judge did dismiss the suit before the time to respond to the motions to dismiss had passed, and that is a procedural error. But I go back to what I said to Director Adcock. The remedy would be to send it back to give us time to respond, and then start the process all over again.
Okay, thanks, Sean. I'm finished.
Director Hines, you're recognized, please.
So, Tom, if we decide or we let the appeal lapse, but we're still bound as sitting directors by our current ordinance, correct, or not?
I don't think so, Director Hines. He has ruled that you're not a candidate. You won't be a candidate until you file a petition sometime in August, and you can change your mind.
Okay.
You from being a candidate. So when you have an ordinance that says a candidate can't collect money before June the 1st, but in fact they can't be a candidate until August the 1st, then the ordinance really doesn't apply.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Tom, you given what the court's interpretation is, and is your opinion that that's erroneous?
Yes, I think that when you make an announcement, get a website, go to meetings and declare you're a candidate, get in the press and declare you're a candidate, and start exploratory committees, one of which you're the chairman of, to say you're running for office, that you're a candidate. That's the duck test to me. If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. But the judge said it wasn't.
So relative to the board members that are up for re-election, are they, notwithstanding the court's interpretation of that, are they prohibited from creating an exploratory committee currently?
There is a regulation that was also dismissed that says that sitting members cannot, sitting incumbents cannot have an exploratory committee. The statute doesn't say that, and nothing in the statute gave the commission the authority to do that. That was one of those administrative lawmaking issues. But I don't think you can have an exploratory committee, but I don't think you're a candidate until August.
According to the judge. All right, Vice Mayor Webb, you're recognized.
I took it off.
Oh, Director Fortson.
Tom, I want to be sure I'm following what you're saying, but do a couple of hypothetical situations for me. If we do nothing and time just marches on and 2020 rolls around and there'll be a different slate of directors who will be facing re-election and a potential different slate of candidates who might want to file. If we do nothing, does this say that that candidate X can, in 2020 in January or 2019 in December, form a committee and start sending out emails and having fundraisers in Washington, D.C. and Austin, Texas, and who knows where, all still as an exploratory committee, and the 6 incumbents or 5 who might be standing here can do nothing during that period?
The ruling doesn't say anything about the incumbents in an exploratory committees. What it says is that you're not a candidate simply because you say you're going to run for office. The question, as you've asked it, is if nothing is done, what will that do in the future? Well, if nothing is done, if we just let the appeal go and there is no further work on the ordinance, then the day after this election, anybody can form an exploratory committee to start running for office 2 years hence. Because it's a 2-year time frame for exploratory committees, which is why, one of the rules of statutory construction is you don't read statutes to an absurdity. And that's exactly what the exploratory committee does in terms of the city's ordinance. And since the city was given express statutory authority to have its ordinance, it's an absurdity to treat it this way. But the question is, what battle do we fight? Do we fight a battle where we don't discuss exploratory committees in our ordinance, where we don't define candidates in our ordinance so that you take care of that time gap, where we don't go ahead and take out the certain provisions of our ordinance which we don't enforce because they have been found in other cases, not expressly against this ordinance, but against this principle to be unconstitutional? Or do we, in this interim, redraft our ordinance, take out what needs to be taken out, put in what needs to be put in, and then try to have something in place so that we don't face that issue this November?
If I understood what you said earlier, the definition of a candidate is not fulfilled until that petition is filed and you have taken that legal step.
The words of the judge was, anybody can change their mind at the last minute.
But Facebook postings and signs and television interviews and all of that up until that date are really meaningless.
Well, you know, I've seen people say a lot of things on television about what they're going to do, and they were pretty meaningless.
A lot of people change their mind, I know. Is it within our power? I mean, well, back up. I vacillate on this issue back and forth, and one reason why I've come around more to thinking we need to resolve the question from a declaratory standpoint is I think it came about because of good government actions back in the past, and I think we've got things sort of out in left field, never land here, the way you describe it, if we do nothing. And but did I understand you correctly that you're saying it's within our authority if sometime this summer or this fall we decide to redraft our ordinance and change some of the definitions and change some of the approaches, that we can do that, and then the so-called Fox ruling or any legislative actions that have been taken up to now would really not inhibit our ability to do that?
Right. You still have statutory authority to impose a stricter time limit.
So, to put it another way, we as the board of directors of this city have the right to establish certain rules of conduct for elections for positions on this board or for mayor of this city.
You have the right to establish more restrictive timeframes for the solicitation or collection of campaign contributions. And I say it that way because set the standards of conduct is a little bit broader than limiting the time frame for collecting campaign contributions.
So I guess, just keep trying to get it straight, get my head around this, criticizing this or making comments about and talking about the state of government does not make one a candidate. Having breakfast meetings does not make one a candidate. Having signs printed does not make one a candidate. And you can go through all of those motions, and our ordinance does not apply, or according to the ruling, you're not a candidate until August when you have to file that petition.
Right.
Thank you.
Which is why I think that if there was an appeal, that would be a successful issue, but I don't think it would be decided until it's essentially moot.
One last question. You say it won't be decided in terms of this election, so if it's appealed now, you're saying there wouldn't be a resolution until after November. There might be a resolution this time next year or some point like that?
Director Fortson, we've got a case dealing with Two Rivers Park that was filed in September a year ago, and it still hasn't come up on the docket yet.
So, but
civil cases are not given priority, and I don't think this is going to be treated as an election case.
one last question about that. So if we did appeal and nothing else happens and the appeal drags on until 2019, at whatever time the court might decide, then that would affect how our ordinance reads at that time.
Right.
If we don't appeal and we amend our ordinance, all this discussion, all of Judge Fox's ruling is all history.
Right.
Okay.
Director Hines, you're recognized, please.
All right. So as we're dancing around the bush here, why don't you think it'll be, didn't Judge Fox suggest that this was an election issue?
He did.
But you don't feel that the Supreme Court may?
I think they're going to look at it as a question dealing with campaign finance, and if you remember the ultimate Supreme Court case on that, Citizens United dealt with something in an election that was already over by a year or two.
Right. Okay. Well, I can tell you that it creates a great conundrum for all of us sitting on this board. I didn't pass this ordinance, and some portion of the do right rule seems that some aren't doing right, and they've taken to legal means to create a loophole that we don't believe is there. And I would go with the majority on this, but I could appeal it, or we can try to change it. I mean, it's I don't know what everybody's feeling as in here. sometimes fortunes have been lost and elections lost on principle, but I think this is what it is do we believe principle-wise that this was good government, and the reason it was put in here is to keep some of the money out of politics, which has become so pervasive, as we've seen from certain candidates going out of state to raise funds for this current campaign. But, my feeling is I could support appealing this and knowing that we may not get a decision, but that we're doing what's right, and then also could see a way to us changing the ordinance down the road here in a couple months after the election season gets going.
Director Adcock, you're next, please.
Yes. Okay, Tom, if we appeal this, I think Director Fortson down there, but I'm not clear yet. If we appeal this, can we still then, after this election, even if it hasn't been decided, can we still then start looking at changing our ordinance? Or do we have to wait until the appeal is heard?
The moment you change the ordinance, the appeal becomes moot. So if you appeal this, the issue I've already mentioned about what is the candidate, if it gets reversed on that, that doesn't mean that we win. That means that we go to trial to decide whether or not the statute applies to these two individuals as candidates.
So when we appeal, it stops the appeal, when we change our ordinance.
The appeal deals with an ordinance that's in place. If the ordinance is changed, then there's nothing to appeal on because the ordinance has been changed and the appeal would be moot.
Well, I was here when we made this ordinance, and it was very, very needed at that time. And I still think it's needed today because it keeps us straight on what we're doing, campaign financing and everything. And it served us well. I'm just sorry that some people decide to challenge it. I'm for appealing it, but then I understand that we need to do something before the next election, and I don't want to do anything that would stop us from cleaning up what we need to do before the next election. So tell me, what do we need to do?
Director Adcock, the impact of exploratory committees on this ordinance was not contemplated because they didn't exist when this ordinance was passed. And it is quite obvious now that exploratory committees have something to do with local government elections. I think it's incumbent upon the board, if they wish for the ordinance to still effectively be in place, to amend it, to include that, to amend it, to include a definition of candidate that is not only consistent with state law, but can't be just overlooked. And in doing that, I think that you keep the meaning of this ordinance in place. You're not repealing it, but you are amending it between now and I said November because of what I said. I mean, it's a 2-year time frame that you can have an exploratory committee, and you don't want somebody, if it is the board's decision not to let exploratory committees collect funds for 2 years, then we need to have this in place before this election.
I don't want to be unfair. I know my election, or the election for position 10 and 7, 8, and 9 doesn't come up for 2 years. I don't want to clean up those positions and leave the people who are running now with a problem. So if we did not appeal this and changed it after the election, the people sitting up here now that's running for re-election, what does that do to them?
They can start collecting money now. They're
They
not
can start
candidates.
I was told and shown on the internet that one of the candidates running for mayor is having a fundraiser in Washington, D.C., and that really troubles me that, people in Washington, D.C. are looking at Little Rock, Arkansas, and going to put money into a race that they know nothing about. And I don't want to be unfair to the 6 or 7 people up here now that are running for re-election.
All right.
Thank you.
Director Wyrick.
Well, I was here when we passed the ordinance, and we called it a good government ordinance. We had a lot of citizen input, and we felt like that it was a great compromise for the people and for the board. So I think we need to keep the ordinance. But Tom, my question to you is, if we change the ordinance today to include candidate and exploratory committees and all the language that we need to do, if we changed it today, did a, what is it called? When you do it fast and you don't wait 30 days? Yeah. If you do that, what happens to the candidates that are doing exploratory committees today? Will that have any impact on them? Do they have to stop and follow what our ordinance is?
First off, I mean, if you change the ordinance as it exists now within the very near future, it wouldn't be able to stop what has happened to date. And you're only looking at, what is this, the 17th, 48 days before they could.
Okay, but if we pass an ordinance today, and I realize that you can't go back and undo what's already been done because they did it under the exploratory clause, but would that prevent them from raising funds from today until June 1st?
Not for 30 days it wouldn't, because there's a referendum period even if you have an emergency clause. And there's only 48 days until June the 1st.
Okay. I have to ask the question.
No,
'cause
it's a good
I don't
question.
know.
It's a good question. I was having to add in my head.
Are you making that up or is it true?
No, I really was adding in my head.
You had to pull it forward.
And I was wrong. It's 44 days, 13 days left in April and 31 in May. So that's 44 and then June the 1st. So it'd be 2 weeks before the election that the ordinance would be potentially effective.
It's effective immediately.
Okay. All right. Well, I think for one that we need to go ahead and amend the ordinance to take care of all the issues that we've uncovered, because I think we still in the city and on this board want to provide good government for elections, and I think it's very important that we go ahead and amend that ordinance. So the next elections are clean the way the citizens wanted them to be, and so I would make that motion that we amend the ordinance to take care of the issues that we've uncovered.
Okay, there's a motion to amend the ordinance to clarify that the language also is to cover exploratory committees and candidates than exploratory candidates. Is that correct? And there's a second to that. Now, is that something you wish to do tonight?
Tom needs to write the ordinance so we can see it first, because there may be some other things that
Well, are
he's
you trying to
uncovered.
orally amend it tonight, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, sure.
You need to have
Maybe
an
give him
ordinance in front of
instructions
you.
to do it.
Yeah, I was taking it as an instruction to do it.
Instructions to do it.
And to return when?
Next week.
That's a little quick.
Oh.
Well,
2 weeks from today.
Okay.
all right, so there's a motion to direct the city attorney to
Would 2 weeks work, Tom?
draft a mandatory language to the
It
ordinance.
would work.
to-
I would rather have 4, because if it was for 2 weeks from today, it would have to be completed by Friday, and that's
Okay.
not very long.
Okay, well, put it on your time frame then. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Director Wyrick, what, I didn't understand that.
I'm making the motion that we direct Tom to amend our ordinance with the exploratory committee, identified the candidates, and anything else that he's uncovered during the course of this time.
All right, is there a second to that? All right, discussion. We do have one member of the public who wishes to speak at some point in time, but I've got 2 directors who wish to speak as well. Director Fortson, you're next on the list.
Just a parliamentary inquiry, I suppose, Mayor. Tom, if the amendments to this ordinance bear an emergency clause, does that change that timetable you talked about?
No, for any measure
Still will be the
It'd
same
be
length.
at least 30 days for the referendum. If it did not have an emergency clause, it would be 60 days.
Thank you.
All right. We have two members of the public who wish to speak on this issue. Let me call on Jim Lynch first.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor Webb, members of the board. My name is Jim Lynch. I've visited with you about this very important issue, in my judgment, a couple of times before. I just want to stress a couple of points and absolutely endorse the initiative and motion of Director Wyrick and others to amend the ordinance, force the issue, and let's get clean elections back on track in this town. Previously, talked a little bit about how we got to the February 1997 ordinance. I won't go over that history again. I will emphasize, however, that the genesis of the ordinance was an initiated act, a statute by the state of Arkansas. 467,000 Arkansans have voted for this. 66% of the people that voted in the fall of '96 wanted the big money out of politics, or diminished out of politics if we possibly could do that. And they said, yes, local governments do have the authority to adopt such ordinances. And this board did that. There's been one, I'm reading the papers very closely all of the time, but my eye picked up on a notion, on a line from a local columnist in the last 10 days. They said this notion of folks raising money, ignoring the ordinance and so forth, using their exploratory committees. He said, you know, the exploratory committee notion is an obvious subterfuge to the '97 ordinance. Well, absolutely. It's an absolute subterfuge, and I don't know that we need to get Merriam-Webster's out here to look up the definition of subterfuge, but it's a way around something that doesn't please them, isn't convenient for them, or whatever, you know, notwithstanding the overall objectives of the original ordinance. The columnist called it a subterfuge, but he says, but it may be legal. Well, you know, I'm not sure it's legal, but we've tried twice. Now, I know the mayor is a graduate of the Fayetteville Law School. There may be some others here tonight and so forth, but the respected and hallowed Dr. Loeffler, right, who everybody respected, taught seminars for other judges and how to be judges. One of his famous courses was called Conflict of Laws, as I remember. Settling conflicts of laws, a law adopted here and another one adopted here, later, 2 years apart, 10 years apart. It happens all the time, perhaps unintentionally, but it is a traditional duty of judges and courts and others in the judiciary to settle conflicts of laws. We've tried twice. Both times the responsible parties have ducked the issue. Don't know why, but if we can somehow amend our ordinance in a way where the issue cannot be ducked, I absolutely endorse this. So we've got to resolve it. One last thing, and you won't be happy to hear this. I certainly was not happy to hear it, but you know, the campaign donations that everybody raises these days have got to be reported within 30 days, and they're on the, you know, and they're in the public domain pretty quick. You can click down on the county clerk's website, find out who's given to whom. That's as it should be, and so forth. Well, guess what? Guess what? The same folks that wrote the big checks in 1997 are already given to exploratory committees in 2018. So they're back. Now, it's a free country. Anybody can give money to anybody they want to in any time. But let me tell you, this problem isn't going away. They're already donating in the pattern that they had in 1995 in 2018 because of this exploratory committee. The same people with the same signature at the bottom. The record shows it. Please defend the 1997 ordinance to your utmost, and let's return to clean elections in Little Rock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. The next card we have is from Russ Rakop.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, it seems to me to be rather hypocritical for you guys to be going after this ordinance when we have the mayor who has a holdover or leftover money from a previous election, and we have a city ordinance that prohibits that. Now, I've had explanations from Mr. Carpenter saying that there were some laws and things that changed all that, but you guys never went and changed that ordinance. So it gives the appearance that some sneaky, dirty campaign stuff is going on with the mayor. Now, if that's not the case, why didn't you change that part of the ordinance to clear that up where the mayor could have these holdover funds? I think if you're going to go into this, that you need to do like I've urged you before, and take this step and make it where people running for the mayor, the board, cannot accept money from political action committees where you have this money. And I know that the mayor's going to challenge my facts like he has before, and he's wrong, that their money can be given from the Chamber of Commerce to other groups, and that can be the same money that you guys have authorized to give to them, like the $300,000 you did this year and $300,000 you did last year. There's no accounting of where that money goes, and I challenge you that if you have that, put that out there. Those forms that you guys have sent me, that they send to Bruce Moore, they don't show how that money's spent. It's not like a checkbook or a register that shows we wrote check number 4567 in the amount of $7,000 to such and such. We don't get that. So we don't know where that money goes. So do the right thing if you're going to try to clean stuff up and make it a level field where you don't take money from political action committees. There can be some of this money that Mr. Lynch talked about here that's coming in from out of state. So if you're going to go after this, let's do the right thing and don't have appearances that the mayor is violating the ordinance, holding over this money, and you're worried about people running against you. You know, to me, that says a lot more about this than that's being said. Thank you.
I attempted to refrain from commenting on any of this, but just briefly, since you bring my name into this equation, I would like to point out, number one, is the chamber did not give my campaign any funding. The chamber does. I don't know if they have a political action committee or not, but they didn't provide any funding. Number two is that there's a big difference between having a carryover and your characterization of it, and that is that when the law did change, I had the courtesy to ask the city attorney whether it was permissible to retain those carryover funds. I did give back as much money as people would take from me, by the way, and I did make contributions to charitable organizations as well. But I did. The difference is that I asked the attorney what the law was, and he told me, and I followed the law. There's a big distinction between that and the current situation. Now, Director Hendricks, it's your turn.
Question for Tom, and it's in reference to the speaker. You don't have to give it to me now, but would you find out for me what the chamber is doing with the $300,000 that we give them each year? And I know Jim is here, and I think I'm recalling where he did file against the chamber. You know what I'm talking about. I want you to, well, maybe Bruce, maybe I should ask Bruce. See, you should have said that. Mr. Moore, would you provide for me what the chamber is doing with the $300,000? Because, you know, ever since I've been on this board, that has been a thing in my craw. Why are these people getting that money and not telling us what they're doing with it? Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, that concludes, I believe, the discussion on this matter. There's a motion and a second to direct the city attorney to, you want me to restate?
No, I'm going to ask. Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Director Webb, or Vice Mayor Webb, excuse me.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So you said that it would take you 4 weeks to draft something. Is that correct?
That's what I'm going to take.
Okay, so if we take 4 weeks to do that, and then we were to vote on it, and then there's 30 days, then it's
It wouldn't
kind of
apply
a
to this
moot-
election.
I'm sorry?
It would not apply to this election.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if I can, Director Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I guess Vice Mayor hit the point I wanted to make, Tom. It's pretty much meaningless for this election, and the impetus for this is for the 2020 election. Is that correct?
I think the impetus is for good government,
Well,
and the 2020 election would be the first
we're
beneficiary.
the first opportunity we have that. So those of us, should any one of us up here join and run for re-election, it's not going to have an impact on any of us up here right now.
Well, it does have an impact on the ones running this year because in light of Judge Fox's ruling, if
Right.
you wish to do so, I think you could start collecting monies now.
Give me $10, Mayor.
Director, Vice Mayor Webb.
Thank you. I guess just kind of a comment about it. If it's not going to apply to this election, then why not wait? And it's going to take you a month to do it. Why do we need to vote tonight? Why can't we?
The time for
Wait a
the
minute.
appeal runs on April the 25th. Right now, I've announced to you all that I do not intend to file an appeal unless I'm told to do so. And the way that Director Warwick brought it up, as I understand it, is don't think about the appeal, think about amending the ordinance. That's how I took it.
And I understand that. I'm just wondering, since it's not going to apply to this election, why we couldn't take our time and make sure we had everything in there that we wanted to have in there.
Vice Mayor Webb, there have been so many people that have expressed interest in this question. I don't plan to get this out the Friday before the agenda meeting and nobody else having seen it. I do think we should share it.
Thank you.
If I didn't show it to Jim Lynch, a fellow North Little Rocker, I would not be alive. So I'm going to definitely show it to him.
Okay, Director Hines, you're recognized, please.
So Tom, backtracking just a little bit, can you give us a memorandum on our ability, based on Judge Fox's ruling, for us to be able to begin raising campaign funds?
Yes.
Thank you.
Tom, just as a clarification, and I hear you saying that based on the court's determination, which is one that you as a city attorney, having given us advice before, has said is erroneous.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the conundrum I see the people on the dais having, is that you have given advice that says that the ordinance does apply to us, despite the fact that the judge has made a ruling contrary to that.
Right, but Mayor, you've got to put that in this context.
Pardon?
The context that this statement is made is there were discussions with me about repealing the current ordinance. There were discussions about amending the current ordinance. There were discussions about what the repeal of the current ordinance would do and what kind of statement that would make of this board about good government. And all I am saying is, because Judge Fox has made this ruling, you don't have to repeal the current ordinance. You don't have to appeal the current ruling. You can amend this ordinance, and at the same time, it's not going to hurt the people running for office now, because by the judge's ruling, under our ordinance, nobody's a candidate until they actually file.
Very well, thank you. Okay, Director Adcock, you're next, please.
Tom, I think that Director Wyrick's motion and the second by Director Wright stated two things. The committees, and then also the, what was the other one?
Candidate definition.
Okay. I would like to add to that carryover funds, and I think that Director Wyrick's motion said, and other things that you came up with. I would like to address carryover funds, since it's not going to have anything to do with the sitting mayor or any of the directors up here. I'd like to see that added to it, because I think our ordinance was very plain. There was three things to do. You could give it away to a nonprofit, you could give it to the city, or you could give it to the people who gave it to you.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think that when we looked at this at a vote recently, I also asked that that was added, and it did not get added. So I would like to make sure that we add that to it, that we go back to the three ways to get rid of money.
Okay.
Thank you.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. In view of what Mr. Carpenter has said about whatever we're going to do now, it's not going to help this election. I agree with Vice Mayor Webb. That what we're talking about is for naught, because one thing about it, Mr. Carpenter is only one person, and I don't think it's fair at the last minute to have him to do all this pushing, and it's not going to do us any good. It won't help us with this before this election. So why are you? It seems to me that they're picking on you, Tom, and I oppose that. So I agree with. Can I make a motion or what?
No, there's a motion on the floor.
Move it.
Vice Mayor Webb.
I don't often say three things on the same subject, but I just want to reiterate. When I listened to Jim talk about the history of the ordinance, and I've talked to him at length about the history of how the Initiated Act got on the ballot and the people running for office, and then they took their time and carefully created an ordinance which has done the city well, served the city well for over 20 years. And so I just don't see why we need to rush tonight to vote on something that's not going to impact this ordinance, this election, why we can't take our time and make sure that we do something that will also last possibly for the next 20 years and serve us well.
Vice Mayor, the actual words from Director Wyrick were "in Tom's good time." And Bruce laughed because he knows that could be until hell freezes over. I will keep in touch with the board about the progress. I have a suspicion members of the board are going to ask that I share this with individuals they may know that I don't know, and I would fully intend to do that. We can just report that's what's going on. But I also think I just took it as a don't let this gather dust.
And I appreciate that, and I don't want it to gather dust, but I think at this point we should wait until after the election, and I understand I may be voting in the minority, and that's okay. Or maybe with Director Hendricks.
Director Wright, you're recognized, please.
Well, in light of what Director Hendricks said, that does make sense. And the fact that he has shared that we can raise money if we choose to, even though I don't intend to until June, I'm going to follow the original ordinance, which is what I had stated previously, because it is stressful doing this stuff. And I prefer to focus on my community and the kids that I'm trying to help. And I don't want to be distracted by that. So I have a firm timeline in my mind, June 1. I'm not going to deal with any of this until then. So I don't see a rush either, but like Tom said, with his timeline, you might not get it till no harm, Tom, but sometimes it takes a minute. But that does make sense, that why the rush, since it's not going to help us.
Okay.
30 seconds or less?
I'll recognize you.
Vote. No.
Vote?
No.
Yeah, you've got the motion on the floor to vote.
Well, you still have discussion.
Yeah, but the discussion is among the board members.
What if we ask Mr. Lynch a question?
All right. Director Wyrick.
You would be out of order.
Am I on?
You're
Thank
on.
you, Mayor. I agree with Kathy that it's not going to have any impact on this election, but I just want to get it on the table that we are going to improve our ordinance based on what we've learned this year. This is drug on all year. There's been many articles written. There's been many questions. There's been many conversations about this whole thing. And as Tom said, or someone said, we didn't know about exploratory campaigns and things like that when we wrote the ordinance. But he has done enough investigating, and we're into end of April now, so probably 4 months. And, I just wanted to get some consensus that we will change the ordinance, we'll address the exploratory committees, candidates, have all the definitions in there that will take care of the next election in 2020. And I do know Tom, he works good under pressure sometimes. So I was trying to let him know that, it's something that we need to do. I'm okay with whatever time frame he can put it together. At this point, it's not important, but I would like to get this put to bed and us move on to some other things besides talk about exploratory committees and campaign and all that kind of stuff.
Director Adcock.
I think the citizens want us to do something. They don't want us to just put something off and just wait and see and everything. Let's go ahead and vote on this tonight. Tom can take his time in doing it, but at least the citizens know that we have addressed this issue and what we're looking at doing on it.
Director Wright.
Well, just for the record, not one of my constituents has broached this to me, and I've been in many neighborhood association meetings, and not one has said a word about this. They're more concerned with what street they gonna get fixed. Okay, those 34 gunshot incidents that I had from April 1st through April 14th, they're more concerned about those things. They are not asking me not one single question about when are we gonna run and when we gonna raise money. So I just want to be on record saying that.
Director Hendricks.
I want to ask a question. Where do we go? It's a word that my daddy used to use, but I won't use it. Are we going to withdraw what are we going to do?
I'm getting ready to ask for a vote on the motion.
On which motion?
The motion of Director Wyrick that is to direct the city attorney to bring to us clarifying language in our existing ordinance that limits fundraising, to clarify that while he agrees that it should cover and does cover exploratory committees, that he's going to make that more specific in terms of the language. And he's going to bring it back to us when he gets done drafting it. And there's a second to that motion by Director Wright. So, if there's no further discussion, let me call for a vote. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes, the roll call. All right, Madam Clerk, let's have a roll call on the motion, please.
Director Richardson. Director Peck.
Aye.
Director Hines.
Aye.
Director Wright.
Yes.
Director Wyrick.
Aye.
Director Fortson.
Aye.
Director Adcock.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Webb.
No.
Director Hendricks.
No.
Director Richardson, do you wish to vote?
I'm going to stay present, Mayor.
You do wish to change your vote?
No, I don't, sir. I want to stay present.
All right. From a vote of 6 votes in favor, 2 votes against, and 1 abstention, the resolution is passed. Okay.
Mayor.
Go ahead and hit your microphone, please.
Kathy, does that prohibit you from making a motion on what you want to do? I don't think so. Tom, would it? Because this thing they're talking about is next year.
That's not what I understood.
What? What did we just vote on? Tell me.
You just voted for me to work on changing an ordinance, which I'm taking as meaning not appeal the decision of Judge Fox, and to bring it back when I can.
Oh, okay.
Which would affect the next election.
No. Now my question is, so Kathy, yours is not needed, yours is not necessary?
Never made a motion, I just asked the
Suggestion,
question.
I know,
And I
suggestion.
just preferred that we wait till after the election, but that is not what
So this will
passed.
take care of what we just voted on? No.
But there are other options down the road. For example, if it's presented, one could move to table it, and then one could either win or lose that vote.
Okay. I was going to stick with the vice mayor.
Okay. All right. Let's see if we can move on to citizen communication. 1 card from Mr. Raycop. Mr. Raycop, you're not very specific on this topic. You've got LRPD, but if you would try to focus your comment, please.
I will. I've been before the board before to speak about this and urge the city manager to terminate the employment of the police chief, and given those reasons. We've seen in the last week some incidents with police officers. We had one who, and again, I'm not asking you to take action on these police officers or to comment, I'm just airing my grievances. We had a police officer who was at a late night bar that Mr. Fortson had visited back when they did those. He was drinking, had an argument with some folks, and then made some false statements about an individual, and he's currently under investigation. You have another officer who was on a 30-day suspension, and I don't think you get 30 days for back-talking your commander or something like that. It's a pretty good infraction. And he was involved in taking a minor to his home at 3 o'clock in the morning. These incidents go to show what failed leadership we have in our department. We had a chief who took off and tried to get a job in another city, and they didn't hire him because of his relationship with black police officers here. And before the mayor can question those facts, I can prove to you that Charleston City Hall was looking at my blog, Bad City of Little Rock, at a post that was called 10 Things You Need to Know About Kenton Tamar Buckner. There were multiple hits at 10:30 at night where they were looking at stories on there. And he came skulking back here saying that he didn't want that job. Well, he was told he wasn't going to get that job. I think the only way that Mr. Moore can redeem himself is to immediately terminate the employment of Mr. Buckner, appoint a officer from inside the department, one that has grown up in Little Rock, one that lives in Little Rock, one that is not afraid to make the tough choices and clean that department up. And again, I appreciate the time to be able to speak about this. And I think, again, I just urge Mr. Moore to fire the chief and do the right thing for the citizens of the city. Thank you.
So, Mr. Rakoff, I gave you some latitude, not knowing exactly what you're going to talk about, but as you pointed out, and as our citizen communication language indicates, that this is for issues that have not been previously brought before the board or are on our agenda. Since you referenced very specific criticisms of certain police officers, I think it's fine, but I'm giving you advance notice. If all you want to do is get up here and talk about the firing of the police chief, that you've already had your shot at that. You've had at least two shots at it. So again, no, you're not being recognized now. Again, this is for items that are not on our agenda and not been brought up before. You've made your position well known on that, and this board is well aware of what your position is on that. Thank you. Director Fortson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify the record that my last visit to a late night bar was 2.5 years ago with Brad Dessart.
No. All right, Director Hendricks.
I hope that this is proper because of what was said just a moment ago about eliminating Mr. Moore. Can you come back up to the mic? I want to talk to him.
No, ma'am. He's had his time at Citizen Communication.
There's two things I want to say to him. Is that Mr. Moore has little or no control. I have told him this to his face, okay? This board controls Mr. Moore. Everybody black in the community will tell you that, okay? So I think this board knows that I'm not afraid of anybody up here. I speak the truth. I'm a God-fearing person. I think they ought to know that by now, okay? So that's what I want. And I wanted to say to the mayor, is it in, well, to Tom, would you look up that ordinance to see if an individual cannot come back and talk about something else? Would you pull that ordinance up for me?
The guidance is on
citizen participation.
Right. The guidance is on the agenda each night as to what citizen communication covers, and that's what the board had agreed upon.
What?
That's what the board had agreed upon for its rules.
No, what I'm asking you, is it in the ordinance that a person cannot come back and back to talk about something?
No, it's that citizen communication is for an issue that.
Well, I know what he's doing. That's citizen participation, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So pull up the ordinance for me because I want to see it. Because it could be that
there's not an ordinance that says that citizen communication is limited to new issues or issues not on the agenda.
Now pull it up for me. I want to read it. I want to see the word new.
It's in front of you. If you've got the agenda, it's in front of you.
It is?
Yeah. It's right before it says citizen communications on the agenda.
I think it needs to be, I'm going to work on it being changed because, say, for instance, if I talk about something tonight, it may be something more that I want to say about it. So I don't think you being not Hitler up here. You know what I'm saying? You just don't do that to stop
Director-
people from trying to talk.
Director Hendricks, you're in a different position because you're elected.
Yeah, I
and
know.
You can speak.
I'm talking about the people that come to the mic. I'm not
Okay.
talking about me. I'm talking about the person that comes to this mic. I think that you're being haughty. You're taking away a person's authority. These are taxpaying people, and if you don't want to hear it, shut your ear. That's how I feel about it. I'm just not used to. These are new people up here, and good night.
Director Hendricks, the language is in the first and second line on citizen communication. And just to be clear, the issue, as Mr. Rakop had already said in his opening comments, is that it's a matter that he has brought to the attention of the board before. And it had to do with his desire and request that the city manager terminate the police chief. To the extent that he wants to criticize the police department and comes up with new ideas or new information about what he wants to criticize, he's perfectly entitled to do that. The issue of whether or not, Mr. Moore or anybody else is going to fire the police chief has been brought before us, and I've told him and I've given him that benefit, and he's told it to us a couple times. So that we're following our rules, and I'm just asking him to do the same. Motion to adjourn. There's a second. Is there any further discussion on that? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. We're in adjournment.
Moore, Mr. Moore.